Welcome into the official. Tonight we've got a bit of a mix and match episode. We are going to talk about Matt's upcoming, just released article that is a primer for the 2023 class. We are going to do a mailbag from our Discord. So if you're not in there and you watch this show, you definitely want to get in the Discord. It comes as part of the lowest level of Campus to Canton subscription, $2.99 per month. And then you can get all the goodies in there with communication with the whole community, and then mailbag questions. And then finally, we are going to talk about recent commitments. There is a lot of it is definitely commitment season. There is a lot of premium players who are making their college decision as we speak. This is the official. All right, everyone. It's just me and Matt here tonight. David, I think you had a flight delayed or something, could not make it, and we don't have a special guest interview. Matt, good to be here with you tonight. We're going to have a nice conversation about a number of topics.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
All right. As always, before we get started, if you're watching this video and you like what you see, please subscribe. Also, put on notifications so you never miss an episode of The Official and all the other great things Campus to Canton is putting out here on the YouTube channel. Speaking of CampusToCanton.com, why don't you also go visit the site? We have memberships starting at $2.99 per month with a ton of extra goodies in there, and it goes up from there. And finally, we have a bunch of guides out. If you're watching this and you like fantasy football, whether it's college, Devy, Dynasty, we have got you covered. A college football guide, a freshman guide, kind of with more of a Devy angle, C2C angle, and then a Devy guide as well. Speaking of all the content we're putting out, Matt, you just released, I think yesterday or today, a 2023 recruiting primer, kind of a very high-level view. These are the guys I like. Is that right?
Yep, pretty much. I just wanted to cover the class for everybody else who wasn't going into it already. So.
Sure. I mean, you know, it's never too early. Rivals even is putting out its 2024 5-stars this week, I believe. So, it's never too early to get a head start on the next class. Even if you just like college football and recruiting, if you're into C2C and stuff, you can never start planning out your next year. And we actually have a question later about, should we even care about the 2023 class already? And the answer is probably yes. So these are rising seniors. And you've already, taken a nice look, and you broke down QB, running back, receiver, which for fantasy purposes, that is mostly what we care about. So you highlighted a guy at quarterback that I personally am probably, in his fan club for sure. Avery Johnson. What do you like about him? Kind of an unknown guy. I think even for people who follow recruiting, he's a 4-star, but he's from Kansas, and I think he gets lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Yeah, he's not really. I don't know what the highest site on him is right now, but I believe he's around like QB 10 for most of them. But I think he's the most dynamic quarterback in this class with what he can do with his legs. That's not really something else that any of the other top quarterbacks in this class can do, really. I mean, there's guys that can move, like Arch Manning can move, but he's not anything special. Dylan Longer, and he can run, but he's not the level of athlete that Avery is. So it definitely sets him apart, and he is a good enough quarterback or a good enough thrower on top of it that really elevates the stock. If it wasn't for his size, if he was 220 pounds, I think he'd be in the conversation for quarterback one.
Those are heavy. Those are strong words. I agree with what you said. And actually, if anybody here has not checked out his basketball highlights and you want to understand the level of athleticism Matt's talking about here, go watch his basketball highlights. The dude has like straight up poster dunks on people on fast breaks in the lane. I mean, he is explosive. He's very springy, obviously, and just elevates. He's got going to have an incredible like broad jump whenever that time comes, and he's testing those sorts of things, vertical jump. He's listed at 170. You did bring up his weight. If he was 220, he'd be even higher for you. He is 170. I saw him in person. Like I stood right next to him at the Elite 11 regional in Nashville. He didn't strike me as like skinny. I mean, there were some quarterbacks that are listed at 170, 175 that very clearly were like either that or below. So I don't know if it's a matter if he hasn't updated certain things. He looks thick. I mean, he not like Cam Newton thick, but he looks well put together. He does not strike me as this like frail, skinny guy. So either he carries the weight very well, or he might be a little heavier than we think. But truly dynamic player. And I also just my 2 cents from seeing him at the Nashville 11. I've been kind of beating this drum. All the things you said about athleticism and exciting nature of his game is true. But he was successful and he looked good. He looked the part, kind of doing those more systematic QB drills. Not showing off his athleticism, not when the play breaks down and he's scrambling around and making a big play. These were like three-step drop throw, 5-step drop throw, and he was mechanical in a good way. Because I was expecting a little bit of just loose mechanics and stuff, but it looked really good. And I was like, wow, if he can do that, plus we know he's like gives off Josh Allen vibes, kind of like with this wild nature of play. In fact, one kind of the floor comp for him for me a little bit is kind of like an Adrian Martinez-y type player.
Okay.
Like the floor, like potentially could be a guy who's running around and unfortunately makes a lot of mistakes, but also makes a lot of big plays. That's kind of your Adrian Martinez. I think on the high end, like he's not as big as Josh Allen yet, but he puts on 20 to 30 pounds in college, which probably isn't crazy considering he also kind of looks young. Maybe some development there just physically that's to come as well. But yeah, I mean, I think his like ceiling is maybe not as big as Josh Allen, but like that kind of player where he's like wild in a good way. And also can make the the QB plays as well.
I think depending on where he goes, this is ceiling talk again, right? But he could have a 1,000-yard rushing season. Like I think he'll come into college and he'll be one of the better rushing quarterbacks. In all of college. I mean, I got him at 21.2 miles per hour, I think, and he moves super smooth laterally too. Yeah,
that's
fast.
Blazing for a quarterback. I mean, we don't see many. If you're cracking,
no, that's like Nate Johnson fast from 2022 class.
I still don't think he's getting enough love. I mean, he is, like you said, he is ranked top 10, but like,
but it's always in the back.
I think the public knowledge just isn't there. But yeah, he signs with a big time. I mean, he's taken an official. He's taken an official to Oregon. I know he's taken an official to Washington. If he winds up at a Pac-12 school, you could be talking about a year one, maybe not day one starter, but like year one gets in the mix and then really produces by year two. I'm all in. Like I've liked him from the moment I watched him. And every time I've revisited Avery Johnson, I either get confirmation from people like you who are like, I'm seeing it too, or just seeing him in person and it's like checking box. Like he just keeps checking boxes every time he comes up in conversation.
I believe Alan True was a big Avery Johnson fan too, I believe.
And he's a Midwest expert. I mean, he knows that area. And yeah, you're right. And then we actually, shout out, we had him on for an interview and he was really, a good kid.
Really nice guy. Yeah.
Nice guy, seemed very smart and really knew his game. And I did kind of like, he's one of the only guys that we asked him, who do you want to model your game after? And he's like, I'm just me. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I mean, everyone else has a comp that they kind of want to be like. And Avery was just like, I'm me. And I was like, all right, man, you do you, because that's pretty sweet. You list a couple of the other guys that I think we all know about, but you seem to say that you're extra excited about Chris Parson headed to FSU. Sell me on Parson. I wasn't super impressed with the Elite 11, but maybe it's just because I don't like FSU.
I believe he was QB7 on the rankings I just put out. So I'm not terribly high on him, but he's in my top 10, so I am pretty high. But he's pretty dynamic. He's not nearly the runner that, Avery Johnson is, but he's not too far off from like a Pierce Clarkson. But I think I like his arm a lot more than I like Pierce Clarkson's. It's not, I don't think he has a crazy arm, but it's a good enough arm. Especially he's kind of a smaller player to begin with, but he can throw with multiple arm angles. he's making a lot of big time throws, a lot of cross field throws, all on the run, off platform throws. And he's a really fun player to watch. And I love watching really aggressive quarterbacks like that who know, I'm going to make this ridiculous throw, and there's nothing this corner can do about it. And it seems like he just makes a ton of those on his film.
Yeah, you like that attitude. I can't wait to get into him, with the full game charting and see if
Yeah, I haven't watched any
the
full
highlights
game
don't
yet.
line up, and there's a bunch of bad plays in between the highlights. But that all sounds great. I think at the Elite 11, he just didn't strike me as anything too special. Like you said, he's not a big guy, but I will say he was kind of like well built, but he was a little bit of a shorter guy. And you don't get to see those daring type plays that much in that setting. So, maybe I missed some of that. We'll have to take a closer look. I trust your opinion I value your opinion very highly. So, I'll have to go back and hashtag watch the tape on that one. So, running backs. I mean, I think we both agree. Most services seems to agree. Cedric Baxter is RB1. He's your RB1. He's big. He's fast. He's got some wiggle. He's kind of got all the big check boxes. What would you say is a weakness of Baxter, since he's generally pretty exciting?
Yeah, he's not much of a receiver. I think that's a pretty glaring flaw in his game. I think he only had like 4% of his team's receptions last year, something like that. It wasn't a lot either way. And other than that, I think he does have a little wiggle, especially around the line of scrimmage. He's very good at finding that hole and shimmying like a linebacker with a cut. But he's not really a guy who's going to shake somebody in the open field. So I think that's probably a weaker area of his game.
I would tend to agree. And I think a lot of the high-end running backs, and you mentioned this in your article, it's not the strongest class we've seen. I feel like a lot of the bigger guys in this class, the 215, 220, and there's a number of them in this class, but they all are very similar like that. Which, I mean, obviously, you don't get a lot of 220 guys that are shifty and have the wiggle and have it all. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. Those are rare. So it makes sense that they don't all have those pieces in place. But I agree, he's probably the best of that group. But yeah, they're all like big, straight line, and a lot of them do hit some nice MPH, but not a lot of that dynamism. Just more like if they have a lane, they'll go. But one guy I think actually can create, and I really like what I've seen as a receiver, specifically even in some rivals camps where he's had some one-on-ones, and he just looks like a really good route runner, really good receiver. It's Justice Haynes out of the state of Georgia, probably going to go to Georgia. I think he's a legacy there. But I think he's got workhorse size. I think he's got very good receiving ability. I haven't seen enough, or I haven't watched enough players to say he's the best receiver in the class, but I think he's very good. So I really like him, but I don't see him mentioned as a lot of people's number one. Do you have any issues with Haynes?
I don't really have any issues with him. I think he's a really good, like, all-around player. He's got, a really well-rounded game. I don't think he has a singular trait that really stands out that much to me. But I do think he'll end up being a pretty good college player, but not like, the next legacy Georgia running back. I don't think he has that level of talent. But I do think, he's very good. He has good stats, too. He moves well laterally. He's pretty fast. He's pretty physical. But I just don't think none of them he's supremely good at.
Yeah, and it could be one of those guys where the sum is greater than the parts. When you put it all together, it's well-rounded, not a lot of weaknesses, but nothing, like you said, you can hang your hat on and say, this is where he's going to win every time. And then I want to give you a couple seconds to just gush on Jeremiah Cobb. I know he's your guy. You mentioned in the article. Paint the picture a little bit for the viewers why he's so good.
Yeah, he's another player. He doesn't really have that many weak parts in his game. He's fast. He's a little small, 190 pounds, but that's I'm fine with that.
Terrible. It's not terrible.
Especially going to an SEC program, he can put on 15 pounds.
Right, and this is weights as a rising senior. I mean, they could put on, even if they put on 3 pounds by the time they go to college, that's starting the process. And then, like you said, another 10 to 15 in college. So we got a ways to go. I mean, 190 at this point doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, I agree. And he's a really good receiver. I think that's the best flashy part of his game is he can go play out wide. He's very fast too. He ran, I think I got him at 21.3 miles per hour, and he looks every bit of it on tape. He's making huge plays. He moves good laterally. Like really, just the size at this point is the only thing. And he's not, he's not a super physical player, but I think that's partially with the size as well.
Okay. Jeremiah Cobb, I think he's a little lower in a lot of the rankings, so that'll be a good one for our viewers and listeners to circle that name. All right, wide receiver, you've got two at the top. A guy you've basically sold me on now for months. A guy I think you fell in love with him kind of very early in the process is Zachariah Branch, probably heading to USC, but taking some other visits. That could get interesting. And Makai Lemon, who I think is going to USC, right, committed. So.
Yeah.
So two guys out on the West Coast, maybe the next, big 1-2 receivers we see go. Tell us a little bit about those two.
Yeah, so Branch is my wide receiver one in the class still. He's been since the beginning. And he reminds me so much of Jalen Waddle. He's such a dynamic athlete. He moves so good, like stop, start, lateral, everything. He is so explosive. He's a track stud to go along with it. And you can just turn on the film and you can see it instantly. He's a high-end punt returner. He works mostly out of the slot because of his size, but he's going to get open with no problems, in college and especially in the NFL, because he's for sure going to end up being at least a day 2 NFL pick if something somehow goes wrong with his college career. But I would expect day 1, just because I think he's a pretty rare player, and he's kind of stuck in a mold because of his size. He's going to end up being mostly the slot guy, punt returner. But he's just so good in that role. I think he'll end up being a pretty high first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to kind of adjust this idea of slot-only guys, because maybe in 2002, but now the whole point is you move these guys around, you're creative with your formations, you get them off the line. Say they do struggle against the press, but you find creative ways to get the ball in their hands without just having to match up against the outside corner. Like that's old school thinking. So I agree with you. I mean, we need to go with traits here. Size does not seem to be a very limiting factor to be very good in the NFL. I mean, I think there's some stuff that still says you kind of need to be the bigger guy to be like a top 3 producer, but like you'd be easily top 10 guy, a top 7 guy, or top 10, 7 to 10 guy, and be smaller. Like it doesn't, I've really stopped worrying about size. And I don't think when you get some more creative play callers and some more creative OCs and stuff, they're going to limit a guy who's that dynamic just to the slot. So I'm with you there. And then Makai Lemon.
And yeah, he's a really good all-around player. He's got a really well-rounded game. He's good at the line, getting all pressed at the line. He can go up and get the ball. He's pretty good after the catch too. Not the best, straight line speed athlete. I think I got him around 20.5 miles per hour or so, but he's just a really good overall athlete. Like he can move good laterally. He's flexible. He's agile. All of that good stuff.
Justin Marshall Fan Club. Welcome. Tell us about him.
Oh man, Justin Marshall, probably the best yak player in this class, and he's super fast, 21.9 miles per hour. He plays another pretty limited role. He's mostly a slot. He plays more running back too, some wildcat quarterback, and he's mostly just getting short stuff behind the line. Just get the ball in his hands, let him go, because half his highlight tape is just him boogieing for like 60-yard touchdowns, and he does kick returns, punt returns. So he's a bit of a limited role, but he has a really high ceiling, and he's really, really good at that one role.
And we do love multi-dimensional guys who are doing it in all areas of the field in all different ways. So that's great. Okay, awesome. Well, that's a great primer. Everybody, if you haven't already, please check out his article. We'll actually link it here in the show notes. And go check it out. You'll get a bunch more names and Matt's nice overview of that 2023 class to get your mind thinking, get some names in your head there. And we'll obviously have much more to say about the 2023 class as we move on. We did a mailbag this week, And I thought it was. We did a mailbag this week, and I thought that it went really well. We got some good questions. I think it's something we're going to try to do more frequently. But we posed it to the Discord and said, hey, anybody got questions about 2023 class or recruiting in general, evaluations? Really anything goes. And we got some questions we're going to try to rattle off here. The first one comes from user The Eagle, I believe it is, in our Discord, or Theagle. And he asks, are there any 2023 or beyond players you would draft in a 7-round Devy startup? So when I was first thinking of this question, I was like, how do I really answer this? Because I don't know right away. And I said, well, okay, in a 7-round Devy startup, 12 teams, you're going to have 84 players drafted. So how many of the top 84 Devy, where does it fall off? Where I'd say, instead of this guy who's already in college, I'd rather take a stab at a total unknown. And so I was looking at my Devy rankings and saying, okay, like 15 quarterbacks maybe I'd want to take. After that, I get kind of uninterested. Maybe 20 running backs, 30 wide receivers. So what's that, about 65 players? Or so, and then maybe 3 tight ends. After that, I'm not that interested in a tight end. So that's like 70 players. I mean, and you can give or take one or here or there, the other, but like there's probably room if you wanted to be really aggressive and shoot for that upside of about 10 potential guys. You could say, I'll take them out of the 2023 class, or maybe even 2024, now that we're starting to get a handle on some of those guys. So, Matt, I know we were talking off air a little bit, but like basically, I think the question boils down to who are the top 5 to 10 guys that you would put above, not knowing landing spot in some cases, not seeing, what they arrived on campus weight wise and all these other, we start getting trickling in information, right? But we don't have that for these guys. Who's a handful? And I know you haven't done, I've done more quarterbacks so far. Why don't you speak to like running back? I'm going to guess you'd say Branch, throw Branch in there because you seem to.
Yeah. So I would probably just list my tier 1 guys from each position group. So quarterback would be Malachi Nelson, Dante Moore, Arch Manning. Running back Cedric Baxter, wide receiver Zach Branch, and Makai Levin. I think all of them are worthy of being picked within those first 7 rounds.
And sorry, running back, did you pretty much only have Baxter?
Yeah, only Baxter.
So he's in a tier of his own. I agree with all that. We talked about most of these guys. Manning is a bit. I think Nelson and Moore are the top 2. Probably going to be my top 2. Manning might end up being QB3 for me. I've done some full game charting. I've watched about 3 full games, every snap from Manning. And the best thing I can say about him is he's like incredibly high floor. I think he's going to come in. He's going to be ready to start week 1 freshman season. But I just don't see the dynamism that like entices you with some of these other guys. For example, I think I had him like draw the defense offsides 5 times in a game. That is real life good, right? I mean, that's maturity. That's knowing how to manipulate a snap count. That you don't see that hardly at all, much less 5 times in a game. But what's that going to do for us for fantasy? I mean, that's not that exciting. I think right now, from what I can tell, that's a little bit more of who he is. He's going to win with his mind. He's going to win with all the little things rather than the 30-yard deep out on a pinpoint, that you're just like, oh my, that arm talent is just ridiculous. He may develop into that. I question whether or not I'd even want to take him in a Devy like right now. I think you'd have to throw it in there. One of the last guys taken maybe, and you just say, we're going to hope he develops into a more dynamic player. I will say for the dynamism point, he's a better runner than I thought, and he's a better runner than you would think, knowing Eli and Peyton.
Well, he's Cooper's son, so it's a little different.
Right.
He's the actual athletic brother.
So I think he's certainly interesting, but like his game right now, I mean, you just watch it and you're just like, if they're showing like, certain blitz or pressure, like he just checks down, throws it to a screen. I mean,
Mhm.
like he had about like, I swear it's like 20 plays in a row where the A dot was like 3 or less. I mean, we're talking like multiple throws behind the line. And you're just like, that's not what I want to see from
Mhm.
this elite talent. But anyway, the only other guy at this point that I might say, hey, take a swing on a 2024 guy, maybe last pick is Dominic Raiola from,
Dylan.
oh, no, Dylan. His dad is Dominic,
Mhm.
who is the offensive lineman, I think, for the Tigers. So Dylan Raiola, already committed to Ohio State, number 1 quarterback in 2024. And he certainly looks like, I mean,
Yeah, I would agree with
anything you
that.
want.
Mhm.
Just the opposite of what I was talking
Like
about.
he could potentially be, if he was in this 2023 class, he could potentially be QB1.
Yes.
He's
Yeah, no,
that,
I
like, we're
think so.
talking that good,
That good, and the thing that sets him apart is you watch him, and it's such a buzzword now, but like it's that off-platform, multiple arm angles type
Mhm.
stuff. He's like throwing across his body. He's looking one way and like doing the Mahomes thing, slicking it out to the other side. So I mean, and that's sophomore tape, right? So pretty
Yeah.
impressive. Already over 200 pounds. So he's like big. I mean, just I'd take a
Mhm.
swing on Raiola, I think already
For sure.
in a deep, in this, 7-round Devy. I'd still do it at the end of the Devy. So, okay. Next question. That was a little bit long. I think we were trying to make these a little quicker, but how far in the future do you feel comfortable evaluating film? This is from one of our founders, Chris Moxley. You're one of the biggest film guys around. So what do you say? I mean, do you have an opinion there? Is there
I
any
mean, it depends on what you're doing with that evaluation. If you're, I have no problem evaluating a freshman in high school. Am I going to use that as like nail in the coffin? This is who this player is. This is who they'll always be. No, obviously, their game is going to change. They're going to get better. They're going to physically develop. So I think it depends on the purpose of why you're evaluating.
Sure. I think a year ago, even I would have maybe said like, oh, I'll just wait for senior film. You don't know how their game is going to evolve. But the more I talk to people, and I've talked to some actual recruiters recently, we had John DiBiaso from Pitt on last week. He's a quarterback coach, and he's like, you can tell arm action as a freshman. Like you can tell velocity as a freshman. You can tell there are things you can tell these guys if they are on the field with varsity. You can see how do they stack up against other varsity players. So I'm starting to think like, yeah, there's no level where you're like, I can't glean anything from this. I mean, like you said, you may not stamp a guy as a finished product. I think that would be pretty silly. But freshman tape, sophomore tape, I don't think that's too early. I mean, I'm already looking at some 2024 guys, and I saw some 2024 guys in person at the Elite 11. So these are rising juniors. They just finished their sophomore year. And some of these guys look as good as any of these juniors out there. I mean, so when they pop younger, I think you can really believe that. I don't think you have to say, well, it's too young to see what they'll become. Most guys do get better. And if they're already separating themselves from the competition, it's the same thing in college, right? Like a guy pops as a freshman in college, and we're like, boom, first round pick. Just wait 2 years as a first round pick. What's the difference in high school? If they're popping that early, it's promising. So I actually don't have a problem freshmen. I mean, if they're on the field as an 8th grader, watch it.
Yeah.
Because if they are on the field with varsity, you can tell what's going on around them, and you can see what kind of decisions are they making. Are they beating players, kind of in one-on-one situations and things like that? Do you have any thoughts on Cameron Selden? This is from user Tacho in our Discord. He's a big dude, like 6'1", 220, kind of an athlete. Do you have any intel?
22 miles per hour. He's one of the best athletes in this class.
Wow. That's Harvard level.
Super athletic. I wish he was playing running back, but he's not. I don't think that's even a consideration right now. But his what position he plays is going to depend on where he lands. Right now, he's expected to go to Penn State, and they seem to want him on defense. So, if he ends up there, it's kind of kills the hope. I haven't been ranking him anywhere because I think that's probably the path he's gonna end up going is on defense. So,
all right, bummer for fantasy.
mm-hmm.
I got another question, and I like this question a lot. So from Sal, one of our OGs in the Discord and OG Campus Extended supporter, he asks Texas, Florida, California, and Georgia, top 4 states. I think we can kind of agree on this for recruiting and pulling star recruits, blue chip guys. What is a state after those big 4 you'd start to think is coming close to that level in talent? And I think this is a bit of a complicated question because raw numbers, you're probably not going to touch Texas and Florida just because there's so many people in that state and they have a good percentage that become very good college football players. I think if you look at per capita, which might be a way to approach this in terms of kind of a sneaky state to go into and look at, I have an article. It's from 2017 from SB Nation. Alex Kirshner wrote it of Split Zone Duo. And it showed that like Louisiana actually per capita had the second most blue chip recruits out of that state per capita. The most was Washington, D.C., but the denominator there is so small. It's only 600,000 people. It's a very small area, so you only need a handful to like have a big ratio. But Louisiana is 4 million people. Now that's about a fifth or quarter as big as like Texas and Florida. But per capita, they put out a ton of players. Really good blue chip players. So I like Louisiana. That's kind of my sneaky good recruiting state. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, generally I would agree. I think they really, in terms of the question, there's not really anybody who's coming close to those top 4. I think Louisiana, maybe North Carolina, you can debate about for that 5th spot, but it's, that 5th spot isn't close to the 4. So it's going to be a while if it ever does close that gap.
Yeah, I think Florida, Georgia, probably untouchable. California is interesting because I think it's like we just think of like offensive skill and that's about it. And then Georgia is kind of a newcomer to that elite tier, but I think they deserve it. All right, we're going to actually have to postpone a couple of these questions, but we're going to do other mailbags and you will get your question answered. We had such a nice response though that we're gonna bump a couple. And because we got to talk about new commitments. So we have Ohio State in the last few weeks. We had Brandon Innes, we had Carnell Tate, and now we have Noah Rogers, 3 top 10 receivers in the 2023 class, which is just laughable. Give me a ranking, 1, 2, 3 of these 3 guys, because we kind of actually did not touch on them previously.
Yeah, so I would go Innes, Rogers, and then Tate. I think there's a bigger separation between Innes and Rogers than there is between Rogers and Tate.
Okay.
So I don't think.
Jewel.
Yeah.
All right.
And Tate was my wide receiver 14 in my rankings, but he's starting to grow on me a bit, and I'm working on an article on him. So stay tuned for that.
Another article coming out. Matt's just cranking them. Okay, then we have if you're not following too closely, it's a shocker. I think some of the people that really had their ear to the ground kind of saw this coming a little bit. The number 1 running back, at least in the 24/7 composite, I'm pretty sure, is Ruben Owens. And he's going to Louisville of all places. So Louisville has now got a high 4-star quarterback, Pierce Clarkson. They've got a pretty good 4-star receiver and now adds a 4-star, but like the number 1 running back on a number of services, Ruben Owens. Totally shocking what they're doing. I don't know. I can't speculate as to exactly how they're doing it, but this is just out of nowhere, this class. And what do you think about Ruben Owens? A little bit smaller, 190, but he's fast, and I think he can catch some passes.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised that he ended up in Louisville, but he's a good player. He's pretty well-rounded, moves really good laterally, good receiver, put up ridiculous numbers. But his big drawback is that he's old. He's very, very old for his class, to the point where it's a pretty major concern in terms of
he maybe should be in 2022.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be a 20-year-old freshman in October of his freshman season of college. So it's not great.
That is advanced.
Good player, though, and it was good enough for me to keep him RB2.
And, specifically from the C2C angle, going to Louisville, like he's going
to play right away.
I don't see how he doesn't almost. I mean, there is still a Trevion Cooley hive.
Sorry to your Cooley stocks, everybody.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is a guy you can roster and just expect immediate contributions, which should bump him up probably in C2C rankings. And then we have two quarterbacks that I'll speak to just a touch. Now, Miami's got a commitment from Emory Williams out of down south in South Florida. It's interesting and noteworthy. He's a 3-star quarterback. It's noteworthy because they also have Jaden Rashada on campus as we speak, on the heels of this other QB commitment. Now, it's pretty rare for a team to take two quarterbacks in the same class, especially like one considered elite level guy. I don't know what it means. Kind of food for thought. Leave some thoughts in the comments. As a Gator fan, I try to keep my homerism out of things for this show, but I would love it if that kind of signals that UM does not think they have a good chance at Rashada, but he's on campus now, so who knows what can happen. And then I wanted to shout out friend of the show, Ethan Crawford, got a commitment in for Southern Miss Golden Eagles. We've had him on for an interview. He's a great guy. His calling card is a lightning quick release and a strong enough arm to make things happen all across the field. He's got a little dual threat in him. Really like him getting to go to an FBS program and compete with some of the best guys in the country. So shout out Ethan Crawford. Congratulations on your commitment to Southern Miss. Well, we'll do some more questions next time. I thought that was fun. Matt, any final thoughts? You got one article out, another Carnell Tate deep dive coming up. What else are you doing?
I'm juggling about like 8 recruiting projects at the same time. I'm always working on something, but we're working on getting more stuff out to you guys.
And that's why you're an invaluable asset for us here at C2C. Always working on something, juggling many projects. And he actually, he just lets me just throw things up against the wall, and he's like, well, I'll take a look at it. So I appreciate that. You humor my brainstorming sessions and stuff like that. So everyone, thanks for listening. This has been The Official.